Hi, my name is Emily Roberts. I'm a sustainability analyst here at Rubicon. Here at Rubicon, I work on our sustainability goals and our sustainability strategy, and also work with our customers and partners on their sustainability goals, particularly as it relates to landfill diversion, recycling, and waste minimization. And today I'll be talking about an overview and introduction to the circular economy. So starting off at the beginning, what is a circular economy? How is it different from a linear economy? So if you think about conceptually a line that starts at one place and ends at the other, that can kind of represent the linear economy that operates on a take, make, and waste model. So if you think about you taking natural resources, making them, transforming them into a product, using that product for its useful life, and then disposing of that product, usually in a landfill, especially here in the United States. And also, if you think about that linear economy model, there's a lot of negative externalities that arise from this type of activity. So obviously, climate change threatens both natural ecosystems and human livelihoods. We have natural resource depletion, trash in the oceans and on land. So those are some of the effects, negative externalities that result from, activities in a linear economy. So if we think about, in contrast to a linear economy, what is a circular economy? You can think of a circle. Instead of starting in one place and ending in another, instead it's all playing together into a circle. So we take natural resources, make them into a product, use that product, but then instead of throwing it away, we collect it, transform it, reuse it, recycle, and then make it into something else that can be used again. So there are three main principles that kind of underlie this idea of a circular economy. The first is designing out waste and pollution. So it's really important to design products and systems from the beginning, from the design phase, in a way that eliminates waste. The second is to keep products and materials in use. So to keep materials at their highest value for as long as possible. And the third is regenerating natural systems. So using renewable energy, replenishing natural resource pools, things like that. And just to get into a bit more detail about, what is this idea of a circular economy? I have this diagram that's called a butterfly diagram. Obviously, it's made up of a couple of different types of circles. And this diagram was really popularized by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who's been a huge proponent of advancing this idea of a circular economy. So in this butterfly diagram, you can see that there's two different colors. There's the biological circles or cycles, and then there's the technical cycles. So when we look at the left side in green at the biological cycles, a good example to think about would be, for example, food, like a food system. So if we start at the bottom where there's the consumer, you'll see all the smaller circles very in the middle. That could represent, for example, sharing food with others, taking unsold food and redistributing it. Then as we get to the bigger circles on the outside, we're talking about things like composting, anaerobic digestion, really returning those nutrients back to the soil, and then so they can be farmed and made into new types of food. Obviously, there's other examples that could fall into these biological cycles, but food is a really good example. And then on the right side with the technical cycles, we're talking about things that are made out of more finite resources. A good example would be like a cell phone or a computer. So same idea, if we start with the user down at the bottom with the small circles that are on the inside, that's things we're really trying to use, use that in an efficient way. So sharing it among people, refurbishing it, reusing it. And then once we get to the outside, that's where we get into more things like recycling. So taking it apart, using those parts to make a totally new product that can then enter back into the smaller circles. But just to return back to those three principles that we talked about underlying the circular economy, I'll just go through a few examples of organizations and companies that are doing, activities that kind of are good examples of these principles. So first, starting out again with designing out waste and pollution. So one really good example is designing a product or a system in a way that eliminates waste. So if you think about eating, at a fast food restaurant or a takeout restaurant, a lot of times we use single-use containers that we use once and then we just throw them away. So instead, what if we could use reusable containers? This is a good example of designing a system that actually eliminates all of that waste that would usually be generated. And then another really good example of this principle is actually designing something that utilizes waste. So using something that's a byproduct or a waste product of another, system and taking that and making it into a new product. So on the right, I have a picture of this company called Toast Ale, and they actually take waste from bakeries, like bread bakery waste, and actually brew that into a new product, which is beer. So moving on, I guess, to the second principle, a couple of examples. Keep product and materials in use. I think a very common example that people often talk about when they're talking about repair is Patagonia. They have this program where, you can prolong the life of your Patagonia jacket or product by bringing it or sending it in for repair. So, it helps extend the life so that we're not, buying more like cheaply made products that are only used at a few times and then thrown away. Instead, we want to keep using that product over and over. And particularly for clothing, repair is also just a cool idea because we can add like new types of colors, new types of textures. So that's a good example of, keeping it in use. And then another second example would be something like a tool library. So this is an idea that's popular in a few different communities, but have you ever had that experience where you think, oh, I really need this tool for a home project, but then you're really only going to use it a couple of times? This is like a good model. It's a good example of sharing resources that might be often like underutilized or not used in the most efficient way. So instead of us all buying tools that we're only going to use a couple of times and then inevitably like they'll just get thrown away when we move, how it would be great if we could all just, use the same tools so that it's used more efficiently and produces less waste. And next I'll talk about a few examples that regenerate natural systems. So I would say good examples of this idea are, primarily using renewable energy for business and industrial activities, and then also things that return nutrients to the soil and to natural systems in agriculture. So I think a good example is this company, Ostara. They have a process where they actually take nutrients from wastewater treatment plants and process those nutrients into a product that they then sell to farmers to put those nutrients back into the fields. So this really cuts down on the use of fertilizer that can be harmful and can actually deplete the soil of its natural nutrients. And I also just wanted to touch upon a few resources, if this is interesting to you and you want to learn more. So the first is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Like I mentioned, they have really popularized this idea and have the butterfly diagram. So they have some different learning paths that you can go through on their website to kind of dig deeper into what is a circular economy. And the second, as I mentioned, recycling is a really important part of the circular economy. So if you want to check out the Recycling Partnership. They have some good resources on the value of recycling, as well as what can be recycled in your community, particularly in the United States. And then the last two resources I will touch on is, first is the Circular Design Guide. And I'd say this is a really good resource, especially if you are teaching design or want to go through some of these in an exercise, like how could we start a conversation about how could we design products or systems in a way that's more efficient, that's sustainable. So they have some different worksheets, some different case studies. And then the last one I'll mention is Cradle to Cradle. So the Cradle to Cradle Institute certifies products. They're thought leaders in the space. But I linked here a TED Talk from their founder, where he really talks about this idea, and it can be a good conversation starter. And let's see. I'm looking at the questions here. It says, oh yeah, so I have a question on what will happen with the candy wrappers when they are returned in their box. So we actually partner with this company called G2, and I had the pleasure to meet G2 at our last offsite meeting. And so once the box is filled with candy wrappers and sent back to their facility, they actually go through the box, sort out. They have some both mechanical and manual sorting that goes on. So they'll sort out any of the contamination that's in there. It might be, the food contamination, or maybe there's a few other materials. So once they take out that contamination, once it's just the candy wrappers, then they will melt down that material into, just plastic kind of grind or plastic pellets. And then eventually, it's made into actually doggy bags. So like when people are walking their dogs, the bags that they carry along for their dog waste. And let's see. I think that's the only question. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope this was helpful, and thank you.